Hey, thanks for checking out The Solid Verbal. Now would be a great time to subscribe to the channel for college football content all off season long.
Will Levis tipped the scales at 229 pounds. He's got a 6'4" frame. Okay. Let me get a few things out of the way here with Will Levis, quarterback
Please.
At Kentucky. Will Levis is obviously very talented. He's proven that he's very coachable. He's tough. He's a big personality. He seems like the consummate teammate. He does have a bit of a disturbing relationship with mayonnaise, which we're just going to put to the side for the purposes of this draft discussion. But he's easy to root for. And my official stance as we make the turn into home of this NFL draft cycle in 2023, my official stance is I like Will Levis a lot. I just wouldn't want to draft him in the first round. I am in near constant disbelief over Will Levis. Complete disbelief for two main reasons. The first is Penn State had him on the roster, Dan.
Yeah, right there.
Penn State had him on the roster 2 years. They used him primarily as a backup, primarily as a battering ram when they brought him in. They didn't even try to develop him. The version of Will Levis that we have seen the last 2 seasons has almost been a completely different player than what we saw in State College. So good on Will Levis for getting out of there when he did. Coaches don't always play the right guys, so you can't fault James Franklin for all of them. But this is
Joe Burrow was a backup. Yep.
This is a pretty big miss. This was a pretty big miss, especially given the ongoing Sean Clifford experience that we saw over the last couple seasons. But nobody could have predicted that Will Levis would blow up the way that he did. For me as a Penn Stater, I'd be lying if I said I'm not at least a little bit influenced by that here. I still think back to the 2020 version of Will Levis when I'm trying to grade out what I want a guy or not. And I can't get that out of my head, but he clearly has done great things. The second reason, definitely more football related. You mentioned at the top of the show, we talked to Nate Tice of The Athletic last year. And at the time, this was right when they were starting to talk about 2023 mock drafts, a full year in advance. And we all saw the Will Levis hype starting then. And I remember I said to him, Nate, I like you. You know a lot more about football than me. I think you're crazy. Why would you put Will Levis this high? And at the time, his answer, which I thought was very smart, was basically that Will Levis had a good frame, that he had a good arm. He clearly showed that he could take a big step forward with a new system if given the chance. And he was somebody, not so much that he was planting his flag in the ground and saying this is a surefire top 10 first round pick, what have you. He was just saying we should monitor him. We should see if he gets better. Right. Because if he continues on this trajectory, there is no denying the fact that he's got top 10 talent. I thought that was a good answer. Did he develop this year?
So he was hurt this year. He lost key pieces, including his offensive coordinator. There are reasons surrounding the Will Levis experience why it wasn't where it was. You know, loses his best receiver and your guy, Wan'Dale Robinson. You're infatuated.
Love him.
Wan'Dale Robinson, who was really, really strong a couple of years ago in the Liam Cohen offense. So, yeah, there are extenuating circumstances. You know, he was out without his best running back the first few games of the season this year, and just nothing really consistently clicked for this Kentucky offense. The defense was inconsistent this year for Kentucky, doing the offense no favors. My worry with Will Levis is, and I don't worry as much about like the Penn State baggage and the up and down nature of his career, because there are always reasons why.
Sure.
My concern is, it seems like things need to be ideal for Will Levis to thrive. And it's never really going to be the case, it seems, in the NFL for things to be ideal. Now, we saw Brock Purdy come in. Ideal situation. That seems rare for somebody to come in and thrive, but he also performed in an unexpected fashion, as far as I can tell. The Will Levis thing, I understand it. I think maybe not more than you, but I think you have the Penn State baggage, which might prevent some of this for you.
Right.
That I think when a lot of these scouts are looking at quarterbacks, they're not necessarily saying, what was his record? What was his team like? A lot of the base level stuff is, he's got to check a number of boxes before we even consider him, right? It's, can he make this kind of throw? Does he have the arm talent? Is he accurate? What is his frame like? What is his speed like? What is, how do people respond to him personally? And then we'll get into the tape against the better teams, the more average teams, and see where his strengths and weaknesses are. It's clear that going back to last year, before the 2022 season, he was seen as somebody who checked a number of boxes. These are the throws you need to make in the NFL. We're not even going to consider you if you can't, and he checked those boxes. So there will be a team that talks themselves into Will Levis because they feel like they can get him that ideal situation. They can have the coordinator in place. They'll have the receivers. They'll have the line. They'll have the system. They'll have the patience to say, we're not starting you for 12 weeks or for 12 months, something like that. And I understand it. I don't think I'm as out as you are, but I definitely agree with the risky nature of Will Levis at this point. Just because, just like what I said for Anthony Richardson, it's not just showing the excellence, it's consistent excellence. And whether it was his own injury this year, whether it was, the offensive system change, whatever it was this year, the Kentucky passing attack left me wanting more. And it wasn't always because of an injured whatever, but it was also because, I don't know, the architecture here, and Will Levis is just making some weird decisions a little bit too often, maybe trying to do everything himself. And so that to me concerns me. So for those reasons, I'm going to pass on Will Levis, but at the same time, if I'm going to be a fence sitter here, I also get the Will Levis thing. I think I do. I'm just, if it's a make-miss kind of show, I think maybe miss me on Will Levis.
How do you feel about Lance Zierlein's comp on NFL.com to Jay Cutler?
That's interesting. Jay Cutler's arm was just out of this world.
Yeah.
In his prime, at his best. And I don't know if Will Levis is necessarily there, but the ability to rise to an occasion. Jay Cutler was showing that kind of stuff at Vanderbilt, and that was not an amazing situation. So I get it from a certain, just the ability to will a team forward and, be that shining star almost unexpectedly at times. But I don't know. Jay Cutler was at times a really good NFL quarterback, and I'm just not there.
I'm just not sure that Will Levis got better. And I think you're right to mention all the qualifiers. He was hurt.
Right.
The team wasn't as good. This team wasn't as good this year. This Kentucky team was not as good. I just would expect something better than 98 yards and 3 picks against Tennessee.
Yeah.
I would expect something more than 109 yards and a pick in a home loss against the aforementioned Vanderbilt Commodores. Stats aren't everything. I know that. But how much of this inconsistency are we willing to explain away because he's got a good frame and a live arm? There have to be limits to that. Accuracy has been a struggle. His ability to sense pressure in the pocket has been a struggle. There are real issues with his game that need to be resolved. Doesn't mean that he's not good enough to rise above it. We saw what he did just in 1 year, moving away from Penn State, working with Liam Cohen, and kind of having this meteoric rise in 2021. That may be in him again. I'm not rooting for him to fail, but at least at present, I think the draftniks are out of their mind with this projection, having him in the top 10. I honestly think it's a case where folks are just so invested in the idea of Will Levis at this point that there's no return. It's in for a dime, in for a dollar. They're just all in, and if he goes down, they'll go down with him.
Well, I think it's also that somebody's got to get picked, right?
Yeah.
That, it's not just Will Levis's... it is Will Levis's merits. That's the most important thing. But you're also comparing him against a number of other quarterbacks that have very specific physical or in-game questions. And so Will Levis showed more in 2021 at times in terms of consistency than Anthony Richardson showed this past year as the full-time starter. He is better built to be a successful NFL quarterback because of his size and the ability to withstand hits than Bryce Young is.
Yeah.
He has the athleticism and willingness to lead a team with his legs that perhaps C.J. Stroud doesn't always have. And so you're looking at the different attributes of Will Levis and you're saying, well, it's not a perfect quarterback class it's actually a pretty flawed quarterback class. And so is there a certain amount of safety in taking Will Levis because he's a B+ at a lot of things and not an A and a C in a couple, when you're comparing different elements of his games? That's, I think, how you get talked into the Will Levis experience.
Yeah. And, there is position scarcity, as you mentioned.
Totally.
If you need a quarterback, you want to make sure you get one of the four that we discussed because, the next man up is Hendon Hooker. I like Hendon Hooker. Maybe we'll talk more about him as the draft gets closer, but he's coming off an ACL, and that may not be an optimal situation. After Hendon Hooker, you're talking about guys like Tanner McKee. You're talking about guys like Clayton Tune. Talking about guys like Dorian Thompson-Robinson, right? It falls off in a hurry. Jake Haener.
My guy, Jake Haener, I was about to say, yeah.
Even Stetson Bennett might be a top 10 quarterback, not top 10 pick in this class. So if you need a guy, you need a guy. And I understand overvaluing it as such, but I'm just, I think I'm out.
Okay.
I think I'm out on Will Levis. I root for him, but I can't talk myself into it.
All right. I hope he wins a Super Bowl in much like the way that Jalen Hurts got the Oklahoma and Alabama social media. I hope Will Levis goes to a Super Bowl and we get a Kentucky Penn State accord congratulating Will Levis on his contributions to football society.